Ladies, gentlemen, fellow shareholders, it would normally be my preference in addressing an audience like this to speak to you without reading from a prepared text, but I think that, given the importance of this annual general meeting, it is the most important meeting that shareholders have in any given year. It is a rather formal process where minutes are taken of the meeting, in addition to which, the text I have in front of me is going to be placed on the club's website. So I think it is important that I deviate from the text as little as possible. So if you excuse me, I'm going to read from the prepared notes, which I repeat would not normally be my preference. Thank you once again for attending your company's AGM in such large numbers. As I stated last year, the AGM of any company provides a forum for all shareholders to come together and to hold the board to account for the manner in which the business and financial activities of your company have been conducted in the most recent financial year. In the case of the Rangers International Football Club, we are here to review the affairs of the company for the financial year ended 30th of June 2017. As you're all aware, the sole business of our company is the operation and related activities of the Rangers Football Club Limited, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of the company. In addition to dealing with the year under review, I will refer to events subsequent to the year end that I am aware are of some concern to a number of our shareholders. Prior to conclusion of the meeting, there will be an opportunity for shareholders to ask questions of your board and the club's management. History indicates that many of the shareholder questions will be focused on the on-field football activities. Unlike last year, we do not have a manager in place to deal directly with such questions. However, my colleagues and I will do our utmost to answer any football-related questions that arise. We all clearly understand the importance and relevance of such questions for a large number of our shareholders. For the purposes of this AGM, it is helpful for our shareholders to bear in mind that our shareholder base includes many passive investors who are not supporters of the club and who invested purely on the investment case that was made to them at the time of their investment. We also have thousands of smaller investors who I assume will virtually all be supporters of the team and are likely to make up most of the attendees today. The polarity of this shareholder mix represents an ongoing challenge for the board, and given the dynamics of managing a football club of the size and popularity of Rangers, is something that I believe I must comment on for the clarification of all shareholders at this meeting. The shareholders who are not supporters wish to see dividends and a growth in the share price on an annual basis. Those shareholders who are also supporters generally have little or no concern for investment returns as long as the team is performing on the pitch. The non-negotiable for each board member is getting the decision-making balance right is the need to comply with our legal and fiduciary duty to ensure that the company is managed in the interest of all shareholders, irrespective of the investment conflicts that we might face. We cannot adopt a binary approach by coming down on one side or the other. Today, these deviations in investment philosophy have been reconciled by the board by convincing the passive investor shareholders that it will be a value-creating strategy to incur losses for a number of years, as if this is not done, it would be impossible to revert to the club being number one in Scotland. Getting back to number one is the only sure way to create sustainable value for all of our shareholders. Most of the non-supporter investors endorse this approach, but their continued support is conditional upon the deficit being carefully managed. On this critical point, the most frequently asked question by non-supporter shareholders is how the board can guarantee that it will be able to responsibly accommodate the differing shareholder expectations without advancing one category of shareholder to the prejudice of others. They are concerned that we might, because we ourselves are supporters, place a disproportionate weight on the demands of supporter shareholders and even supporters who are not shareholders, solely on the basis that their passion for our club makes them naturally more vociferous and demanding of our attention on an almost daily basis. These investors observe the extent to which supporters use social media and even the general media in an attempt to engage with the board to influence our decision-making. It has been the case since I was a boy that supporters voiced their strong opinions, especially immediately after a match. Players and managers get slaughtered one week, only to be heroes again the following week. The potential influence of this, however, has been vastly increased in its pervasiveness by the volume and intensity created by social media and the parallel attempt by members of the general media to join in such conversations. The board recognizes that supporters sometimes need to let off steam, but will not engage with individuals on operational decisions, such as when a manager should be fired, who should be hired, which players should be let go, who should be signed up, etc. In stating this, I understand that the myriad and often conflicting comments that are made ultimately reflect the passion that supporters have for our team, and we would obviously like that passion to continue. It is healthy for the club. I also take the opportunity to reiterate what I stated last year. Your board will not betray the well-founded process of recovery by sacrificing a number of future seasons in an imprudent financial attempt to influence any immediate one. The board consists of experienced businessmen who, despite all wearing large supporter hats, will always make decisions in the best immediate, intermediate, and long-term interests of the company. We strive to get the balance right, as expected of a public listed company, and to be continuously alert to our own natural supporter bias. To do so, we must maintain a realistic recognition of the differing appetite for risk displayed by the different shareholder categories. The fear of investors who put in large amounts of money is that they don't want supporters who invest in smaller amounts, or perhaps are not even shareholders at all, to dictate the affairs of the company. This, of course, can be extended to the media. Supporters, in turn, whether shareholders or not, don't want pinstripe suits who have no passion for the club dictating how their club is run. As I stated during question time last year, this is exactly why I believe that football clubs should not be listed, but that is a remedy that's not available to us at this time. The most important financial risk that the company continues to face is the need to strike the right balance between financial prudence and deficit funding. The club is still unable to regain its former status by relying solely on the income it generates from its normal operations. The board remains committed to the prudent use of debt funding, but in doing so, it remains essential that the board does not significantly deviate from its approved financial plan as a result of supporter and media pressure during one specific season, and thereby abandon the financial discipline that is so essential to ensuring football and commercial success over the medium to long term. Of course, running a loss-making business requires funding, and this requires the ongoing support of shareholders to ensure that the legal permissions are in place. We cannot do as we please when introducing funds. So far, the board has been successful in securing the cash resources that have been required, often at extremely short notice, but we cannot take future funding for granted if there is no end in sight to the company's losses, or if we take on excessive risk during this intervening period. It is the responsibility of your board to ensure that this does not happen. I emphasize the importance of managing risk because it's not a trivial one, particularly at this stage of our recovery when we can ill afford to make big financial mistakes. It would be wonderful if we were in a position to project our revenue and costs for a number of years, to put the required funding in place, and then tell management to get on with it. That can work on a relatively risk-free basis in most businesses, but is not possible in a sporting environment where the manager and player revolving door keeps on spinning and the personnel going out more often than not do so at a cost to the club in question. Under such circumstances, if additional non-budgeted investment is not made available, the club would go backward. No club is immune to this, and it is something that your board is particularly alert to. In fact, we have keenly felt the negative impact of this merry-go-round with the loss of 2 managers and the corresponding impact on the player squad since we stood here at last year's AGM. In our discussion with shareholders, we state the obvious when we reiterate that the appointment of the football manager is the most important that the board can make, and that we will treat it with the importance and diligence that it demands. Anything less would be reckless. When Mark Warburton and his team engineered their exit from the club, we were forced at short notice to commence a process to find a replacement. As is demanded by shareholders, this was an extremely thorough process. We did not have a director of football at the time, so we formed a subcommittee to come up with the specifications that we believe were important for a manager at that juncture. The subcommittee worked extremely hard and quickly to pull together a long list of potential managers who applied for the position, as well as identifying others who we thought that we could possibly approach but hadn't applied. This long list was trimmed, and then a thorough desktop evaluation of each candidate was undertaken in order to produce a final shortlist. This list was submitted by the chair of the subcommittee, Stuart Robertson, directly to me, and I then had the opportunity to interrogate the list to my satisfaction and to ensure that the list complied with the underlying processes. The next step was to conduct a formal interview process with each shortlisted candidate. After the interview process was complete and information had been obtained on salary demands and compensation payments, if any, the preferred choice was submitted to me for a final interrogation before being forwarded to the full board for further scrutiny and approval. Ultimately, a unanimous decision was reached by the board in that instance, and this whole process, including negotiation with Pedro's club regarding compensation and start date, was done so swiftly and effectively that Pedro had his feet under the desk exactly 1 month after the walkout by Mark and his team. On the issue of manager appointments, I personally don't subscribe to the position of those who advance the view that it must have been wrong to have hired a particular manager simply because the results during the season necessitated the removal of the individual in question. The simple fact is that any manager can fail in any season. An example of this is Leicester City last season. Claudio Ranieri was fired for poor results, having just won the EPL the previous season. If his seasons were the other way around, then Leicester's history would be devoid of that magnificent fairy tale season. Nearly every manager is fired at some time, often repeatedly. But there is no credible room, in my view, for recrimination and finger-pointing as long as the appointment was made in accordance with an agreed process that assesses all the risks when making such appointment. There is no such thing as a risk-free managerial appointment. In my opinion, what would be truly wrong is if the board made a quick knee-jerk appointment without a thorough consideration of all options available at the time, just because it appealed to certain sections of the media or to some of the more outspoken supporters. The appointment of a football manager is far too serious for us to endorse such a frivolous approach. The search for Pedro's replacement has also been thorough and of appropriate duration, this time under the guidance of Mark Allen, the Director of Football. Based on the manner of Pedro's departure, we had to first re-evaluate the criteria we required of our new manager prior to going through the detailed process that I've already referred to. In this instance, however, our shortlisted candidates include individuals presently under contract, and that adds an additional unavoidable time element. We should have something to report shortly in that regard. Our company is fortunate that, by far, most of our supporters recognize that the business of the club, like any company, should be conducted in a confidential and professional manner. Their continued support for the board and the team is shown by the fact that we again have record season ticket sales in excess of 44,000, and by the fact that the many supporters that comprise Club 1872 have again overwhelmingly endorsed the reappointment of all directors. In the case of Graham Park, this was slightly less, but only because he was falsely alleged to have had an undue influence in appointing Pedro as a manager. As I stated earlier, after a thorough process, all board members endorsed Pedro's appointment, and we take collective responsibility for that. I will now move on to the highlights and lowlights of the year under review. The most significant highlight of the year was the successful conclusion of the Sports Direct litigation. The settlement amount paid by the club was £3 million, which is a great outcome that will yield many multiples of this in the years to come, now that we've regained control of our retail assets. In fact, we will get all that money back in the first year. At the time, that we announced the settlement, we were legally prevented from disclosing the £3 million payment due to the confidentiality clauses that Sports Direct insisted upon in the legal contract. However, under accounting regulations and disclosure regulations, we were obliged to disclose it in the annual report, as that overrode the confidentiality clause in the agreement. The settlement payment was fully funded by interest-free loans from shareholders. We have continued with the development of young players over the last year, to the point that we have a strong pipeline of homegrown players that have a realistic potential of breaking into the first team. This is a significant hidden asset for the club. The Academy at Auchenhowie has been completely restructured and is now performing to the high standard we anticipated. The young players who are taking advantage of the opportunities being provided to them include Ross McCrory, who I thought was the man of the match last night, Ryan Hardy and Jamie Berjonas. During the last year, 28 of our Academy players were selected for international squads from the under-16 age group through to the under-21s, which is higher than in previous years. We've also concluded a complete overhaul of the scouting department, and we anticipate significant benefits from this in the years ahead by recruiting the best talent in Scotland, while also targeting certain markets in Europe. Mark Allen must take credit for his big and immediate impact in this area. We continued with the much-needed infrastructure spending to ensure that the Ibrox and Auchenhowie remain world-class facilities. I think that the progress is evident to supporters attending Ibrox on match days. Further work will continue on our key facilities, with several £1 million already committed to over the next 2 years. We continue to be envied by other clubs for having such a magnificent debt-free stadium and debt-free training facilities. Our strengthened commercial and marketing function has put in place processes and measures that will allow us to take advantage of the opportunities that are available to us when the existing retail agreements terminate at the end of this season. Contractually, the first round of new negotiations commences tomorrow, and we are well prepared for this. This bodes well for a return to achieving top value for the Rangers brand. The improvement in our commercial operations has seen commercial income almost doubling over the last 2 years, and we expect further growth in the years to come. All of this benefit will go into the squad. Even though non-ticket revenues have already increased by 55%, this is not enough. We need to be challenging at the top of the Scottish Premiership and be back in Europe before we can generate the levels of sponsorship that a club that our size and prestige ought to achieve. Supporters through Club 1872 have become a significant shareholder and are having increased dialogue with the club at the shareholder level. The level of constructive discussions is valuable to the club and to our supporters. Season ticket sales have reached a new high by exceeding 44,000 for the first time, with an average SPFL home attendance of 49,000. This is up from 44,216. Turnover increased by £7 million during the year under review. Inroads have been made to restore the club to a prominent position within the Scottish football authorities. In that regard, Stuart Robertson was elected onto the SPFL board, where he replaced Peter Lawwell. We will continue to push hard in this area. We have also had encouraging engagement with the City Council to redevelop the area at the front of Ibrox. This can be a very significant benefit to the club and to our supporters. Finally, our charity foundation is incredibly well run and continues to successfully expand its initiative and is adding great value to the various communities that we as a club are supporting. There are also some disappointments. The failure of 2 managers to get the team to perform at a higher standard was extremely disappointing. We most certainly have not seen a commensurate return on the significantly increased investment that was made. Once again, a significant part of our increased player budget has been tied up in resources that we have not seen up to this point make a meaningful contribution on the pitch. We have also not found an effective mechanism to compensate for the distorted wages and transfer fees paid by English clubs, even at the Championship level. The fact that the Championship clubs are smaller in status and support than Rangers assists us up to a point, but does not go far enough to offset the money on offer. We have also not yet reached a level of stability that will allow us to invite independent directors to join our board. I stated at last year's meeting, I think it is important that the board of a club like Rangers does not purely consist of supporters, and we do have some kind of independently minded directors on the board as well. We are hoping that the opportunity to attract more independent directors will present itself during the coming year as our situation stabilizes. Finally, while we have made significant progress in improving our business processes through technology enhancement, we can still do more to improve our social media platforms. This will require further investment, but we are in the process of making a senior executive appointment to address this shortcoming and thereby give our supporters better general communication capability with the club, as well as a more enhanced customer experience. This is presently a priority for the board. Sadly, a number of members of the Rangers family passed away during the last year. We give our thoughts, thanks, and best wishes to the families of Billy Simpson, Roger Hind, Peter Jacobs, Daniel Prodden, Davy Proven, Hugo Ekiog, Joran van der Broek, Johnny Little, Colin Kirkwood, and Yvonne Schofield. I also want to give a special recognition for the work being done by the Rangers Youth Development Company. Their dedicated team of people sell lotto tickets and, combined with other initiatives, have donated £7.5 million to Auchenhowie over the last 16 years. Lastly, I would like to express my gratitude to my colleagues on the board of the company and to the directors and management of the Rangers Football Club. I thank each of you for your continued support during this protracted period of difficulty. The last couple of years have been tough, but none of you have shirked from the task. And a special thanks from me goes to John Gilligan, who resigned during the year after adding tremendous wisdom and insight since regime change. I don't know where John is, but John, we do miss you at all of our board meetings.